Woo! Turn on the heat, baby, one more time. Because the hedonist extraordinaire, the golden stallion, the man of tomorrow, Sabzu, the rated R radio star, is here, ready to corrupt the world one episode at a time. Of course, this isn't exactly an episode where I'm going to corrupt anybody, but, well, actually, it's your Star Trek update for April. And, well, Star Trek, I've always said this, is just one of the most subversive shows or really pieces of media ever created. And I don't think most people realize just how fucking subversive and how quietly and how slowly subversive it really is. One of the things I love about it. But anyway, now this month, unfortunately, unlike last month, we'll correct this hopefully next month. You are not being joined by the best. And of course, the best is an acronym that the Sovereign Tech listeners have come up with representing the unholy trinity of hosts of Sovereign Tech. Of course, B standing for Brian, that being I, E standing for Ellen, and then ST standing for Stephanie. Of course, Ellen and Stephanie are not joining me for this episode, but we are going to we'll just bump it. I mean, pretty much, me, Ellen, and Stephanie were having such a good time over the weekend that, well, we couldn't end up getting behind the mics. And we were going to talk about Star Trek Voyager. We were going to talk about our top episodes and everything. And it turns out we were having dinner. We ended up watching Star Trek Voyager together the whole time. So anyway, so sorry you weren't a part of that. It might have been interesting to just turn on the mic and narrate the whole damn thing because, boy, we were watching some hot ones. Blood Fever, one of my favorite episodes. I mean, just so sexy. Like, really, really sexy. I can't begin to tell you. Oh, baby, but things were taking place. So anyway, so my apologies. And I'm sure the ladies would extend, the wonderful ladies that they are, would extend their apologies as well. But we will we'll definitely reconvene for the Star Trek update because I love having those two on for the Star Trek update because, honestly, I mean, you have no idea. I can't tell you how awesome it is to, just spend time with a couple of, just amazing women and say, hey, yeah, you want to watch Star Trek? And everybody just goes, well, yeah. Whoa. Does life get much better than that? I don't think it does. Anyway. So, I am here alone for your Star Trek update, but that's okay because honestly, there's been a lot of news. And usually when I have the ladies on, we don't cover so much of the news going on, at least not until we have, Ellen has asked to do it and we'll make it happen. She has yet to watch Discovery. She wants to, she's been dying to see it. And we'll make that happen, and she had asked if we'd watch it with her and everything. And of course, that we'll make that happen. But, so once she's up to speed on that, then, we can talk more about the news coming out because obviously a lot of the Star Trek news these days is about Discovery, but not all. This week, or this month, I should say, we're going to talk a little bit of news of what's going on with the Abrams-verse, or, technically, as serious Star Trek fans know, which I assume are listening to this. Actually, I know there's people who don't even give a shit about Star Trek that are listening to this. They just like hearing the sound of my voice. And hey, woo, hello. But regardless, we will be talking about the Kelvin timeline. So we'll get into that later, though, and maybe we'll have some fun stuff. But let's open it up. I'm not going to talk about any of the comics going on. There has been, I will say this, there has been a real shakeup at IDW as far as what they're doing with Star Trek. It's actually kind of sad. So I will say, while I'm not going to review comics, I'll give you a little comic book news quick. One is that there are two kind of main titles that IDW has been running for a year, almost 2 years now. They're ending both of them. That being Star Trek New Visions, which was kind of like the photo novel, which is really cool. I've talked about these in past Star Trek updates. Those are coming to an end. That series is coming to an end, which is kind of sad. I mean, it wasn't like, I mean, it was good, but I didn't enjoy it as much as other Star Trek titles that IDW has put out. But they're also ending Star Trek Boldly Go, Star Trek Boldly Go, which is the comic series that does take place in the Kelvin timeline, which picked up right after Star Trek Beyond. And the rumor mill is that because Paramount doesn't know what they're doing with Star Trek, and this is going to be appertinent later on in this episode, because Paramount doesn't know what they want to do with Star Trek, that IDW doesn't know what next direction to go with the series, because it was just supposed to be, and I imagine a deal was made where, Paramount said, okay, you keep the IDW, you keep the story going until we have the next movie come out. and we'll keep you apprised, and you can kind of lead in and everything, because as I've said many times on Star Trek updates themselves, the comic books for the Kelvin timeline have been more or less canon. I mean, they get referenced in the movies themselves, in the three movies, in the three movies, all three of them, at various points. There's little drops. I mean, they do a better job of it than Star Wars does, and Star Wars is meant to be all canon by design as far as multimedia goes. So it's a real shame. I have loved the Boldly Go comic. I have absolutely fucking loved it. And so it's really sad that one of my main titles that I get excited for once a month isn't going to be around anymore. But both of those are going out, and a lot of the creative team around, there was like a set team that was handling Star Trek in general at IDW, has either been transferred or they've left. So there's a big shakeup going on at IDW. I don't know what exactly they have in mind. Of course, the Discovery comics are still coming out, and we're still in the middle of the Light of Kalis comic. I think we're up to issue 3 or 4, or up to issue 3, with issue 4 coming out soon. And that comic's been, if you wanted to know more about, about the Klingons, especially the, kind of the newer styled Klingons that we're getting in Discovery, well, you got it in that. And it's been somewhat interesting, even though, it's not the greatest comic series. I'm not like, I can't wait for the next Light of Kalis to come out or anything. There was a Discovery annual that came out that was pretty interesting. That didn't have to do with Klingons. That wasn't part of the Light of Kalis storyline. There are more, and I'm excited about this. I think there's at least 2 more miniseries coming out for the Mirror Broken series, which is the next generation version of the Mirror Universe, or the next generation crew in the Mirror Universe. Which, fuck yes, like, do this all day long. This should be a regular series already. I know the artwork that they're running with is very high end and intensive, so maybe they can't deliver on a monthly schedule exactly, but boy, I wish they would. But they've got a couple more series coming out over the next few months, and I'll be reviewing those as they come out. So, I mean, there's good and bad stuff happening in the Star Trek comic book, universe, which is the most consistent thing that we get. Fortunately, we did get a new Voyager novel. I haven't read it yet, but we did get a new Voyager novel by Kirsten Byers, who, of course, is also on the writing team for Discovery, which I couldn't be happier about because I love her Voyager novels. And Fear Itself, I think, is coming out in June, which is the next Star Trek Discovery novel. I already have it pre-ordered. We'll review it when it comes to June. But in May, my hope is that we will do that Voyager review show, and we'll do it with with Stephanie and Ellen, and that'll just be a ton of fun because they're a ton of fun. So anyway, what I do want to review, and we'll open this up with a review, we'll talk about Discovery first. We'll get that out of the way because there is a lot of news going on. The day after this episode that I'm recording is getting released, it should be April 17th, is the day that shooting starts for Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, which I'm very happy to hear that that's happening. There's already news that Jonathan Frakes is going to be, Will Riker himself is going to be directing a couple episodes. Very excited about that because I think he did a phenomenal job with, directing in Season 1. Of course, I think Jonathan Frakes is a great director anyway. I mean, we're talking about the guy that directed First Contact and Insurrection, 2 just top-notch films. And fucking yes, Insurrection is a top-notch film. But things are taking place at Discovery, and we'll talk about them. But the first thing I want to do is that just a couple weeks ago, the second volume, or what they're calling Chapter 2 of the Star Trek Discovery soundtrack, came out. And only on digital so far has it come out. There's a vinyl release and a physical CD release that are coming out, I think, sometime in late May, maybe even June. I have no idea why the fuck they do that. Like that doesn't make any sense because there's no way they're making a huge, pressing number of physical CDs anyway. The vinyl stuff, yeah, whatever. Vinyl people are used to having to wait and pre-order and do all that. But even the CD people, you'd think that they would, they get it. That, okay, yeah, we pre-order and all. I mean, there's some things that I have to get on CD. I either have to buy it through Entrada or I have to get it through La La Land Records, right? Actually, a lot of Star Trek soundtracks I have to get through La La Land Records. Like Entrada, I just recently had to get, they released this beautiful full CD of music from Joel Goldsmith for the first episode of Stargate SG-1. Was it Children of the Gods? Not to be confused with the Eric von Daniken book, which of course inspired Stargate in a very real way. But regardless, like you can only get that on CD. Fine, I will pre-order your fucking CD, But that's the thing, is that like, people that want this stuff physical, that want physical copies, like, I don't know why you have to make them wait. I mean, they're ready for it, or if anything, let them pre-order, which usually they do, but they're ready for it. Just crazy. Anyway, maybe the pre-orders, they feel like that's all that they have to press. Maybe that's what's going on. Regardless, the digital version came out, and I mean, I only buy physical CDs when I don't have any choice. Like I'll take digital, and I don't care if they're 192K, constant bitrate MP3s. That is fine with me. And most human ears aren't going to hear the difference. I'm not Vulcan. So, okay. But I mean, really, I've been that way. I've been listening to music that way for so long. I get, I get the arguments around it, the lack of richness and all this different stuff. And well, I mean, and I am passionate about music. And I mean, like, I'm really passionate about music. I want to make this clear. There's so many people that say, oh yeah, I love music. No, you love your music. You love the music you're into. You don't really love music in the abstract. I love music in the abstract. I have very diverse tastes. The only thing I won't listen to is country, or at least most country, unless the song was actually written by like a hard rock act originally, right? Like I always bring up the example of Honky Tonk Badonkadonk, but because that was written by the guys from Giant, Dan Huff and all that, which they're metal, they're metal guys. They're not country people, but that's why the song sounded so damn good, because it should have been metal. But regardless, I am a genuine fan of music, but I get it. There's the people out there. Oh no, you can only listen to it on vinyl. Oh no, it's no good unless it's a FLAC. Oh no, it's no good unless it's this. Yeah, believe me, as somebody who I'm trying to tell you how fucking passionate I am about music. Okay, and in my lifetime, you cannot imagine the amount of money I've spent. Okay, on music that you wouldn't believe if I told you. Okay. Believe me, 192K MP3s are just fucking dandy. They are just fine, and they get the point. And I'd rather have like the music. I mean, because it's really not. It's kind of a false dichotomy, right? Like to say that that's quality over quantity. Like I like having the quantity, and you could say that to have that quantity, I have to have a certain lack of quality, as in quality of the sound, but it's not a lack of quality in the music. In fact, it's the only way I can get like the real richness of music, which is having a complete picture, not, complete picture as in knowing so much music, not in being picky about the sound quality per se. Okay. I mean, hey, look, I used to drive around in my favorite car that I've ever owned was a 73 Ford LTD that I had to get rid of before I moved to New Hampshire, unfortunately. Okay, otherwise I'd still be driving it, and because that was just a few years ago. But my 73 Ford LTD, I mean, it had a little mono speaker in it, and I wanted to keep it original. I didn't, other than I painted everything triple black. I didn't make any real changes as far as the sound system goes and that, and it was actually great. You want to talk about a rich sound? Have it coming out of Ford, 73 Ford LTD, with that little mono speaker in the dash. That's a rich sound for you, baby, and that's a great feeling. But anyway, enough of the past. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about this. So the Chapter 2 a soundtrack for Star Trek Discovery came out. This is a much better collection, in my opinion. This is, as far as like an album in its entirety, far superior to the first release that came out for Discovery. And it ironically does not have the Discovery theme itself in it. So they're pretty much forcing you to buy Chapter 1 as well, if just for the theme alone. Because I reviewed the Chapter 1 soundtrack for Season 1 of Discovery, and I thought it was kind of lackluster. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it also wasn't great. I mean, however, this time around, suddenly you start to see why Jeff Russo, I think, was chosen as the composer and how he's that good. Because you get in, I mean, like the first couple tracks are pretty good, but you get into where, let's see, I think it's like track 5 or something, where it's the rebels haven't completed their evacuation. As soon as you get to that, business picks up just like it does in the show, like when Empress Giorgio shows up, right? And it's awesome. And then it's a very much more action-packed, instead of so subdued as Chapter 1 was. It's a much more action-packed soundtrack. But let's be clear here. The real winner with all of this comes in the last 3 tracks, okay? Because the last 3 tracks, actually the last like 4 or 5 tracks, are all from the very last episode of Star Trek Discovery, which we all know what happens there. Spoiler alerts, shit, if you had no idea what happened, I mean, come on. The Enterprise shows up. It was so cool. I talked about it, a couple Star Trek updates ago when the episode aired. That was fucking amazing. Like, and you knew, you kind of had the hint that it was going to happen. And when you listen to the music, just the music alone, you know what's coming. You know what's happening. So like the third to last track is, or maybe second to last track is I've Never Been to Vulcan. And so that kind of starts sort of the peaceful up tempo. Then it gets to the next to last track, which is Incoming Transmission. And that's when at the end of that, you get the whole dun, 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 and then suddenly it goes into the dun, 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 dun. And I mean, you know what's going down. And that's like in the episode, it's when you're seeing on the tactical screen where it's showing the registry number of the ship that put out a distress call. And it's NCC 1701, of course. And so that hits, that music hits. Jeff Russo does a great job with Alexander Courage's cues. And then, what was the surprise and the beauty of that last episode of Discovery was after you see the Enterprise, in what I consider to be splendor. We're actually going to talk about after this review, and we're not going to be much longer with this review. We're going to get to talking about why the Enterprise looked different than it does in the original series, because turns out there's actually there's a bullshit reason. There's 2 bullshit reasons for it. And one of them is one that the crew couldn't do anything about, or the production crew couldn't do anything about. And we'll talk about that. But anyway, during the end credits of the last episode, suddenly they hit the full, theme from the original series with the opera and everything. Right, all that stuff. And they redid it. They completely redid it. It's the first time that particular piece of music in its entirety had been performed in decades, apparently, in the way that Alexander Courage, from the original notes or whatever. I mean, it's a very interesting story how Jeff Russo put all that together, and it turned out beautifully, and you listen to it at the end of it, and it sounds so fresh. It still feels classic. It still feels old because, that kind of operatic style, doesn't lend itself to much, to many movies or TV shows today, but it feels really good, and it sounds really crisp, much crisper. I mean, look, ever since I was a kid, I had the GNP Crescendo collections of the original series soundtracks. I've had the Best of Star Trek, volumes 1 and 2. I mean, I've been listening to stuff for years. And as much as they try to remaster and clean up that sound, it still sounds old. And when you hear it in the Chapter 2 soundtrack from Discovery, boy, you realize what that was supposed to sound like. And it just sounds so nice. It's worth buying the soundtrack alone. And I did have to buy it. I couldn't find it on the torrent sites, even though I would have bought it anyway. I had it pre-ordered digitally because I want that shit at the stroke of, whatever, any time between midnight and 3 when they release this shit. So I was really impressed. I mean, like that was really cool. So, this is a much more action-packed soundtrack. Again, my main complaint with Chapter 1 of this Discovery soundtrack was that it was very subdued, way too subdued. There's nothing going on. The theme song's great and all of that, or it's pretty good, except for the Game of Thrones cues that annoy the fuck out of me, because, Game of Thrones is, easily one of the worst shows ever produced. But other than that, and I mean that from the heart, other than that, it's good stuff. But yeah, Chapter 2 really resolves that. And this should be, honestly, if they're going to wait for a CD, for a physical release, they should have just done a double disc. Like there's, do Chapter 1 and 2 and give the people that are willing to buy the CD something a little extra, something a little special, But regardless, Jeff Russo, yeah, he's doing a good job. I have any concerns I had over his abilities last time I talked about it, those concerns are gone. He's really hitting it. And I didn't notice the music so much in the second half, or the second chapter, should I say, of season 1 of Discovery in the shows themselves, because there's so much shit going on. I guess that's good. And sometimes when you don't notice the music, that means that it's working, right? Because it's just a part of the effect of, the magic that's happening on the screen. And I guess this is one of those cases because I didn't really notice a lot of these cues. And when I hear them, though, I can feel what's going on, and that's what matters. And that doesn't always happen, especially since most of the time, a lot of TV series today are like the chapter 1 of Discovery, where again, it's all very subdued and like, there's barely a reason to even have music going at any given moment. But this is a different case. So definitely pick this up if you have not, and give it a listen. It's well worth it, to get your hands on, even just for the last 2 tracks, quite frankly. Incoming transmission where you hear the Star Trek theme come up in this really exciting moment. And then for the actual, the end credits of the original Star Trek theme is just, it's magic. But all right, let's shift gears into some news. In fact, just talking about that end scene where that music plays, let's talk about that scene. And this is from IO9 here. Star Trek Discovery's version of the Enterprise had to be modified for legal reasons. So I'm not going to read the whole article. Bottom line being, and I'm still somewhat unclear on where the dividing lines between Paramount and CBS. They're kind of 2 separate entities, but also they're kind of not. And there's been a lot of news going around about where there's going to be a more an acquisition of Paramount's properties, more or less, by CBS. It's so weird. Like, this is such like legal limbo, mumbo jumbo, I don't know, whatever terms you want to use, of the difference between Paramount and CBS and how all that works. So there's a chance that CBS is just going to be like buying out everything Paramount outright, which would be good for Star Trek fans because then all of Star Trek, the movies included, would be under one banner. Okay, because right now Paramount controls the movies and CBS controls all the TV shows. But that's kind of a recent development in a way. And I wasn't aware of some of this. That's why I say I'm not totally clear on where a lot of the dividing lines are, and I've yet to have enough. I'm interested, but I've yet to have enough interest to find out the exact story on how this works. But apparently, ever since Star Trek Enterprise ended, which, what was that, like 2005? Okay, when Enterprise ended, that's when there was this big gap between Paramount and CBS and what they could do, okay, as far as Star Trek goes. Now, come to find out, this what I'm telling you didn't only affect the look of the Enterprise at the end of Star Trek Discovery, but this is also the reason that the Abrams-verse was done in the first place. Okay, and why everything looks different in the Kelvin timeline and in the Abrams. That might have happened anyway because JJ is just that kind of guy. Okay, but obviously he can also be very faithful to things. When you watch the Star Wars: The Force Awakens, clearly he can be very faithful to design if he wants to be. In fact, he can be a little too faithful by some people's metric, and I get it. Okay, but so because Paramount is like the movies and CBS only owns certain parts because there's a split on who owns what as far as Star Trek goes. Apparently for Discovery, they literally could not use the original look and design of the Enterprise. Now, of the NCC 1701 from the original series. Now, this is where things get a little confusing. Okay, because then that's also the claim of why the Enterprise had to look different in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek films, because they couldn't use the original design of the original Enterprise. But like, wait a minute. So does Paramount own those designs, or does CBS, or is it just like so, like locked up in between the two that neither can use it? I'm very confused by this. I don't have good answers, and the article doesn't give good answers, and I can't find anybody with really good answers as far as how this works. Because what was confusing to me was that, the original argument that was made for why they did an updated look of the design of the Enterprise, okay, of the NCC 1701, was because it would be too visually disruptive between the Discovery and what the original Enterprise looked like. Now, I said that that's bullshit, okay, because when you watch, this would also perhaps explain why the Defiant looked different, in the Mirror Universe episodes for Discovery, why the USS Defiant didn't look just like a normal Constitution-class ship, and maybe why they couldn't show us the Defiant, because we know what the Defiant had to look like, right? I mean, because that was from the episode from season 4 of Enterprise, of the show Enterprise, In a Mirror Darkly, easily probably the best episode of that entire series. So I mean, that kind of explains that. But in that episode, In a Mirror Darkly, you see what a NX class ship looks like next to a Constitution class, an original series Constitution class ship. And there's no stark contrast. In fact, I've made the point for, now over a decade, that it's amazing how advanced the 60s inspired, 1960s inspired bridge of the original Enterprise, in this case for the USS Defiant, from the episode The Tholian Web, looked compared to what you were used to seeing with like the LCARS design and even everything that you were seeing aboard, the NX-01 from Star Trek Enterprise. Okay. It looked futuristic, even though you knew that it was really antiquated and didn't look nearly as well defined or as futuristic as everything you were seeing on the NX-01. But it was just so off the wall to modern audiences that it made it look really futuristic, which I thought was cool. And I was like, well, in Discovery, they could just do the same thing. Like it'll look just so different. It'll be almost so alien that you'll just be like, wow, this is these Constitution class ships are really advanced, which is how the Discovery novels, which are tie-ins, they're kind of canon, they're tie-ins, that's how they've been selling the Constitution class ship every time they've bothered to mention one, is that these are like the elite ships of Starfleet. And in fact, like most other governments and races don't even know they exist. Like these are a really, really big deal for the Federation, which I love that attitude around the Constitution class ships. It's one of the reasons I was inspired to use them, or to use one for the Star Trek erotic audio theater that I'm making now, Star Trek Forbidden Frontiers. But anyway, so the claim is that, CBS couldn't use the original series designs. And so they had to make a different looking Constitution class ship. Now, they are saying, like the designer in the article from IO9, the designer did come out and say that since the show's 10 years previous, we wanted to make sure that it was a look where you could see that the ship could, that the Constitution class could get upgraded to where it could end up looking smoother and sleeker like it does in the original series of Star Trek. So at least they know, this isn't the final design. And I hope they stick to that. But I mean, it's just the designer talking, but whatever. But yeah, so this makes a lot more sense because I thought that the argument that, it would be too visually striking, compared to the Discovery and it wouldn't work and people wouldn't believe it. That argument just didn't hold water with me. There's no way, because it would just look more futuristic. That's all. It wouldn't be a bad thing at all. It wouldn't be like a bad contrast or whatever. It'd be a good one. So, but the idea that, legally they couldn't even use the image of the original Enterprise, now that makes a little more sense. So I don't know what we're going to end up seeing as far as the original Enterprise goes, but that's the reason that is apparently the official reason why the ship looks different. But it's a confusing legal issue because, again, supposedly this is also the reason why the Enterprise looks different in the Abrams films. But then who the fuck owns those original designs? I mean, it's just, it's such a clusterfuck. I mean, I'm not one usually for acquisitions, but I kind of hope CBS does just buy out Paramount, flat out. Even though they do kind of own it. That's all. It's all so weird. Whatever. Straighten this up, guys. Get Star Trek under one roof already so that this bullshit can stop. Anyway, okay. So there's that little bit of news. Let's move on from there. Now that we do know we're going to get the Enterprise in season 2, a lot of people have been wondering about two things. Who's playing Captain Pike and who's playing Spock? Well, we have answers to one and kind of answers to the other. As far as playing Captain Pike, they have announced who has been cast, a guy named Anson Mount, an actor named Anson Mount, who's been in a few different things. I've never really seen him before. I looked at him. He looks good. He's got kind of a Jeffrey Hunter-esque look. I mean, it's a good choice. Definitely a much closer look to Jeffrey Hunter, to the Pike, that we know and love, compared to the much older, though still well done, Bruce Greenwood. I liked Bruce Greenwood. I wouldn't have minded if Bruce Greenwood was Pike in this, even though his age, he's gotten much older than even in 2000. That was almost 10 years ago when he when he first took on the role of Captain Pike. So this Anson Mount guy, you can look him up online. It's a good look. I'm sure he's going to be a fine fit. I have no problem with it. There's no announcement as far as who's going to play number one. Now, she is a character that actually built up, if you take into, again, Kirsten Byers, who is very much in the Star Trek novel world, is one of the lead writers for the show and one of the leaders in the writing room for Star Trek Discovery. Now, there was the book by, was that Dayton? No, that was David Mack, Desperate Hours, which was the first Star Trek Discovery novel, which I reviewed in a Star Trek Update a few months ago, or back in September when it came out. That book was dynamite. That book was so cool. I love that book. As far as a Star Trek book goes, I'm not going to say it's the most original piece of work ever done, but for Star Trek, it was really cool. And in that, you find out that number one from the cage, that served under Captain Pike, originally played by Majel Barrett Roddenberry, she has like this, not relationship romantic, but well, almost, it almost got there, but she has a connection with Saru. And I don't know if they're going to play that up at all come season 2, but we definitely don't know who's going to be playing her. And I was far more interested to see who they're going to get. I mean, how do you replace, Majel Barrett? I mean, you just can't. Anyway, that'll be interesting to see what happens there. But now, Spock, that's the big one I think more people were even interested in. Turns out it doesn't seem, and this is from another article from IO9, it would appear that we're not going to see a modern day Spock, or like a contemporary Spock within Discovery. That book that I mentioned, Desperate Hours, has Spock in it. Spock and Burnham talk to each other. You find out what happened between the two of them, all that. It's a again, that's a solid book and kind of canon, more or less canon. Unless it needs to be debunked. And there have been tweets going around about the canonicity of these novels and comic books. And the writing room pretty much said, we try to be as broad so that the writing room doesn't have to contradict us. So the books can stay canon. Anyway, so Spock, and again, look, real quick on the canonicity thing with the Discovery books and comic books. Yes, previously, this was not a thing with Star Trek. It was made very clear that only the TV shows and movies were canon within Star Trek. That has changed with Discovery. Okay, so get the fuck over it. Because wow, I mean, there's nothing more pointless and worse than idiots online saying, which yes, obviously most people that are on that online are idiots. Okay, that idiots online start saying, well, if it's not in the TV show or it's not in the movies, no, motherfucker. It's been argued about. It's been laid out by the production teams and the writing teams that yes, these are tie-ins. They, things that happen within this is stuff that you can, more or less take to the bank, unless the for some reason, the writers for the TV show really have to change something. Okay. But even, here's the thing within Star Wars, it works the same way, is that in the novelizations, like say for the movies or something, they've already come out and said, well, if the movie contradicts something that's in the novelization, then you go with the movie. But otherwise, the novelizations are just as canon as anything else. Okay. So I see this as kind of the same way. So, and it's not just me. Okay, like I said, there's official arguments and clarifications made recently, as in the past month, okay, between the writing teams and the authors and all involved, okay, with Star Trek Discovery. So, go ahead and enjoy those books and those comics. Anyway, boy, where the fuck was I? Yes, okay, so Spock. So what's going to happen with Spock is you're actually going to see flashback scenes in Season 2 of Discovery that will show a younger Burnham and a younger Spock, but it won't be contemporary to where it's happening, where you're seeing what Spock was like during Season 2. They're probably going to save that as a big gun. Like if ratings go down in Season 2 or Season 3 of Discovery, what are you going to do? You're going to bring in a Season 4 savior, right? Much like DS9 did and Voyager did. Okay, even though Voyager wasn't Season 4, it was Season 5, where 7 of 9 came in. But with Deep Space Nine, what'd you do? You brought in Voyager, you brought in Worf for Season 4. And he's, for a lot of people and for the ratings, it saved the show. So what you can do is hold off on the big reveal for Spock. Go ahead and have these flashback sequences. But if you need to really save the show, sure, Season 4, ratings aren't doing so well, you bring on Spock. Winning idea. I think that's probably kind of the long-term idea that they're running with. So you're going to see Spock, but you're going to see a very young Spock. You're not going to see Spock apparently aboard the Enterprise. That's not going to happen. But we also don't know who's going to be playing Spock, but we do know what kind of Spock we're going to get. We're going to get a much younger Spock, not a contemporary within Discovery Spock. So does that make sense to you? Links are in the show notes for all these stories, by the way, if you want to check them out. But that's what's going on with that, which, I'm fine with it. I mean, I would have been fine with, hell, if they wanted to bring in Zachary Quinto and let him do his business, as Spock, aboard the Enterprise under Captain Pike, contemporaneously in season 2 with whatever's happening for the USS Discovery. Great. Please, by all means, I have no issue with this at all. In fact, hell, I'm actually hoping, because Discovery seems to pay so much. I mean, they really, and I'm one of the ones that congratulates them on this. I think there's some people who think it's annoying, which, fuck you. Okay. I love the fact that Discovery just bends over backwards to make canon references to, Enterprise and anything that they can make a reference to, they make a reference to, of previous Star Trek within the prime timeline. I think that's so great. I wouldn't mind if they brought on Sybok, because, if they're willing to, because they're even paying so much homage to Star Trek the Motion Picture, which I love and is kind of getting a renaissance of being appreciated for what it was, thankfully, finally, after 30, 40 years. But, I'd love it if Sybok was there and have Burnham encounter Sybok, I think that would be really huge. And I know, Star Trek V is kind of the one, that's one where even it's kind of challenging for me to say that it's great Star Trek, because I really understand the arguments against it. But I still love the movie. I still think it's very enjoyable. But, some of the quotes from Kirk in that are in some of the moments, that is a movie of some of the best Star Trek moments ever, But yeah, what the hell? Let's take reference to Star Trek V. In fact, when did I see a reference to Nimbus 3? I'm pretty sure I read something where I saw a reference. Maybe it was in a comic book where they mentioned Nimbus 3. No, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was. I thought somebody was talking about the Battle of Nimbus 3. Nimbus 3 is the planet of galactic peace. That's from Star Trek V. Okay, so let's just keep going. Bring on Sybok. I think that would be. I would love that. I'd be totally on board with it. But anyway, so that's the deal. Also, they did announce, as far as interesting cast members, Tig Notaro, who the comedian, that I'm a bit of a fan of myself. In fact, I'm going to be seeing Tig perform very soon. She is going to be playing she's going to have a guest. I don't think she's going to be a full cast member, but she's going to have a guest role as Chief Engineer Denise Reno of the USS Hiawatha. I think that's awesome. Great. Yeah, bring on Tig, and I hope she gets to bring a little humor with her as well, because she's a tremendous comedian. So I'm pretty interested to see how that's going to work out. That was a hell of an announcement. I think that's really cool. I like that Star Trek can bring these people in, even from these other worlds. I think, as much as I rail against Amazon, I love the fact that Jeff Bezos was in Star Trek Beyond. I think that's wild. Go ahead. Yeah, bring them all on. I think that's cool. In fact, so when Stephanie Ellen and I were watching Voyager the other night, the 2 episodes we watched 2, both of them were from season 3. We watched Blood Fever and Distant Origins, and 2 of my favorites. And the amount of actors, Brad Dourif was in. Or no. Okay, so there was another night where the 3 of us, we were watching another episode of Voyager. It was Meld. The episode was Meld. I forget which season that was from. But that's where Tuvok encounters that Maquis guy who's a murderer, but played by Brad Dourif. It was Ensign Suter. I don't know if he was an ensign. Anyway, Brad Dourif's in there. Voyager, this is what I loved about Voyager, and I'll probably talk about this when we actually do a Voyager review. The thing I loved about Voyager, and that Star Trek can do all day long in my book, is Voyager was it was Star Trek for Star Trek's sake, and it brought in so much science fiction alumni into it. Brad Dourif is a legend in genre, genre film, in genre fiction, or, genre television and everything. He was in Dune. He played Peter DeVries. He was in Babylon 5. It's a laundry list. He's been in so many shows because he just has this very unique, sometimes creepy style to him. Though you should have seen him in the episode of Babylon 5. Fucking awesome. But it was Brother Edward or something in that. But anyway, you bring on Brad Dourif, and then there was, in Distant Origins, one of the guys behind the dinosaur, or the Saurian, I guess I should say, the Saurian makeup, was another guy from Babylon 5 who played Talon. Voyager was so cool because they just said, no, we're a science fiction show. People are speaking our language. Let's just go whole hog and let's just dive deep. Let's stop trying to make it relatable to everybody else. And this could arguably be why Voyager, in some minds, critically or in ratings, flopped, because again, it was made for the diehards. It was made for the hardcore fans of science fiction and Star Trek, in particular. But I love the fact that it brought in so many. That show really did bring in a lot of actors, to just do awesome roles in that. And so, if Star Trek wants to keep bringing in people from all different aspects, please, I think that's awesome. I think one of the few mistakes that Star Trek Beyond made, which came out, 2016, which was an awesome Star Trek movie, probably my favorite of the Kelvin timeline movies so far. And I did say so far. Well, we'll get to that in the next bit of news. I think the biggest mistake they made, they had that kind of okay song by Rihanna that they tied in somewhat with Star Trek. They should have had Rihanna was in Valerian. They should have had Rihanna actually have a role in Star Trek. I think that would have been pretty nice. I think that would have been cool. So I like it when Star Trek brings in, kind of these names. It makes news, and, it's cool that all these different people get to be a part of the Star Trek family. You know what I mean? So anyway, we just mentioned Kelvin timeline, so let's get into that. There's no other major Discovery news, I think, to bring up right now. Obviously, I don't think I reviewed, I think I talked about it, but they released that deleted scene for Star Trek Discovery where you see what happens with Empress Georgiou, and that she's running a bar on that Orion refugee area that I think was on Kronos or something. And she meets up with the guy who's Section 31, hands her the black badge and all that. That was really, really cool. If you haven't seen that bonus scene, you got to look that up, that they played. I think they played it at WonderCon this year. It's debatable whether or not that's totally canon, but boy, I hope it is. And I can't wait to get I've said this since they talked about the black badges in episode 3 of Star Trek Discovery. I can't wait to get my hands on those black badges. And QMX, I check for it every day. They have their coming soon listing for it. You can't pre-order, but they have their coming soon listing for it. I check every day to see when those black badges are going to go on sale, and I'm getting at least 3 of them. So for Section 31, I love it. So I expect to see Section 31 in season 2 of Discovery, which I've been expecting Section 31 to be a big part of Discovery since the first episode, quite frankly. And certainly since the 3rd episode. But we'll hopefully we'll get that payoff. Anyway, Kelvin timeline. Woo. That's something, the Kelvin timeline could really use some Section 31, I think. But regardless, we do have some news as far as what's going on. Things were falling apart. Like Quentin Tarantino, of course, there was the allegations made against him of sexual misconduct and, other terrible things. So it's debatable whether or not Paramount is going to go forward with the whole Quentin Tarantino idea, even though anything going on doesn't seem to be stopping anything Quentin Tarantino is producing otherwise, any claims made against him or proof against him. But regardless, this is from Screen Rant, and it's Star Trek. Paramount has plans for, quote, at least, end quote, one more movie. I'm going to read the article quick here. Let's see. Star Trek was successful. No, I'm not going to read all that, but let's get to Quinto's quotes, because they were talking to. Let's see. It's still not clear what form the next Star Trek film will take, But Zachary Quinto, of course, who plays Spock in the new movies, says Paramount fully intends for the franchise to continue on the big screen. In an interview with Observer, the current Mr. Spock assures fans that the studios intend to make at least one more movie with his crew. Quote, which ones are going to happen? Which ones might happen first? I can't really say. I don't know, honestly. I know there are lots of conversations being had about it. I know there are plans afoot to do at least one, if not more, movies. End quote. Quinto also shares his excitement over the prospect of working with Tarantino on a Star Trek film. Quote, man, I would love it. We would all love it. I've been a fan of Quentin since the first movie, which I think was Reservoir Dogs. I've just always been an admirer of his unique brand of storytelling, and I feel like to interlace that with the Star Trek universe would be a real dream. It would be amazing. End quote. So, and they bring up how Simon Pegg said that Simon Pegg, who plays Scotty in the new movies and also was like a major writer and creative force behind a couple of them, he said that he was unconvinced that the Tarantino film was going to go forward, and there has been other scripts, and we knew that there are other scripts. Like when Zachary Quinto here is saying he doesn't know which one's going to get made first or which one's going to get made, because there's the one that had to do with time travel where what was his name, Chris Hemsworth would come back as George Kirk, as Captain Kirk's dad. Yeah, I mean, like, this is very much in the air. But the bottom line being is that, yes, Paramount is looking to make at least one more Star Trek movie. And I can imagine so, because this same thing really happened with the original series films back in the, late 80s to early 90s. So, because what you had then was you had Star Trek 4, which up until First Contact was the most successful, box office-wise, was the most successful Star Trek film to date. Okay, I forget how much it grossed, but it did tremendous box office numbers, and it was a critical success as well, which can be rare for a Star Trek movie. Not so much with the Kelvin Timeline movies, all of those, including Star Trek Beyond, which didn't do well in theaters, unfortunately. And that, even though that was my movie pick of the year for 2016, I thought it was so goddamn good. All three of those movies have had critical acclaim. Audiences love the first two for whatever reason, and I think it was botched marketing. Didn't like Star Trek Beyond, but regardless. So when you had Star Trek 4, which was that 87 when that came out, when Star Trek 4 came out, it was such a wild success with everybody that, okay, well, let's make Star Trek 5, and Star Trek 5 did not do well. Star Trek 5 is comparable, I think, to Star Trek Beyond, but Star Trek Beyond was actually loved by a lot of people. By the people that actually went to go see it, they loved it. As for Star Trek 5, that wasn't the case. But because Star Trek 4 did so much money, Paramount said, well, we can do Star Trek 6. It's like, it made enough money, let's give it one more go, one more cash in, and we'll just end off the series. And they did Star Trek 6. And then Star Trek 6 went on to be, a fairly successful and well-received Star Trek movie. For a lot of people, as far as original series movies go, usually that's their second favorite one next to Star Trek 2. And I understand why. They're made by the same guy, Nicholas Meyer. And Star Trek 6 is a great movie. I mean, it's a great fucking movie. So, I imagine what's happened is that the 2009 Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness made so much money that, okay, yeah, Beyond didn't do it right, or, didn't do what the studio needed, even though it was a great film. It didn't do what the studio needed. I think they figured, well, we can at least get one more film out of this, and we can get one more cash in out of this. And then if that does well, maybe they can keep making more. And I hope they do, because I love the actors. I love the crew. I love the look. I like everything that's going on with the Kelvin Timeline. I'm a huge fan. It's interesting now to note that the reason it's so dramatically different is due to legal issues, which, boy, if you needed more arguments against intellectual property, you got it. You've got it in spades when it comes to Star Trek now. But regardless, this is, so we are going to get at least one more movie. I definitely believe that. I don't know what movie it's going to be. I'm open to any of them. If they want to do the one with George Kirk, where Chris Hemsworth comes back, fine. You want to do the one with Tarantino, we'll see how that goes. I mean, whatever, because Quinto, Carl Urban, that guy is such a tremendous actor. I mean, I think he's really the linchpin of the Kelvin Timeline movies, because he just works. Like, it's inarguable how well he works as McCoy. Not that anybody was like banking on, okay, DeForest Kelley was great, right? But not that anybody was banking on, all right, what are we going to do about, Dr. McCoy? Boy, I wonder how Dr. McCoy is going to be in this. But he ended up just doing so fucking well that you're just like, well, okay. He sells the rest of the crew. Like he makes Kirk. He makes Spock. I don't think people realize that, just how important Karl Urban is to all this. He's the guy that should be able to say, okay, Paramount, you want to do another Star Trek movie? Blank check. You cut me a blank check right now, because he makes everything else believable. And fortunately, he's in great health and, in great shape. And so, I don't have any concerns there. Chris Pine's fantastic. I think they're all great, but I'm just saying, let's be clear here, that Karl Urban is the guy. Just a tremendous actor, easily one of my favorite genre actors in a long time. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to get at least one more Kelvin Timeline movie. I'm excited for that. Even if it's one that they do to close out the series, I'm fine with that too. I do hope that it opens up. Well, I don't know. I was going to say I hope it opens up with, Captain Kirk commanding the Endeavor, the USS Endeavor, which is what he was doing in Boldly Go, just to keep those comics, good in canon. But whatever they do, will be fine. And I'm sure IDW will come out with some kind of prequel comic, as they have for other films, and make everything, tie in nicely. And I'll be looking forward to that. I kind of don't want it to be time travel. I get it. It's the fourth movie, just like, Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home was a time travel movie. Okay, let's make this one a time travel movie. I would honestly, I'd rather it not be. I would like to see, I'd like to see some Klingon action or some Romulan action. You're in Boldly Go in the comics, you've encountered the Borg. I'm okay with it being a Borg movie too, but yeah, do something like that. Give us I'll take a new spin on a more traditional enemy. I really will. Even though Star Trek 2 is really that. But I think that would feel good. I would be interested to see what they could do with the Borg, and to see, really Spock in his prime and Kirk in his prime against the Borg. Even though if you want to really see that, there's William Shatner's classic book, Star Trek The Return, which was a sequel to his equally classic book, Star Trek Ashes of Eden, which is one of the best-selling Star Trek books in history. You get a lot of that. You get a lot of Kirk versus the Borg. You get Spock versus the Borg. In fact, it's a very funny scene that happens in that. I love The Return, one of my favorite Star Trek books. Definitely would be in my... Yeah, that's got to be in my top 3 Star Trek books, Star Trek The Return. That's so solid. And you can read it without reading Ashes of Eden, frankly, because it picks up right after Star Trek Generations, the movie. Anyway, so yeah, so there's a good roundabout of news. And it's all good news. I think all of that is great news, except for the bullshit that we have to deal with legally of why we can't use, the bloody Constitution class the way it's supposed to bloody look, right? As perhaps Scotty would say. But anyway, so I guess we'll end this off, make it a good even hour. An update on Star Trek Forbidden Frontiers, which is the erotic audio theater that I am producing. So far, everybody involved, and I've got people I did not expect to be involved. Everybody involved is very happy with what they've seen so far. The short story, a lot of people have really enjoyed that. I'll tell you that. So the short story, which was that issue 14 or 15 of the Sovryn Tech newsletter, the latest, it's in the March issue of the Sovryn Tech newsletter. The short story in that I wrote for Star Trek Forbidden Frontiers to introduce you to all of the, different characters within Forbidden Frontiers. And those are, you do have the main 3 characters, which is fine because there's kind of main 3 voice actors that I deal with, that being myself, Stephanie, and Ellen. But in Star Trek, you usually have kind of the main 3, right? You remember in the original series, you had, you had Spock, Kirk, and McCoy, right? You had in The Next Generation, you kind of had Riker, Picard, and Data. You sort of always have, there's usually that main 3 that, or at least I think that's the best way that it works, when you have those 3 to kind of play off of each other. And so you have, the characters that you're introduced to in the short story from issue 14 of the Sovryn Tech newsletter. You had Captain Damian Ivanov, which of course I'll be voicing in Forbidden Frontiers. Then you had Commander Varish Jen, which is a Betazoid character. Ivanov is a human character, obviously, but this is all Section 31, right? And so you have Commander Varish Jen, which is a Betazoid character that Stephanie will be voicing, and then Ellen will be voicing the Vulcan character, Lieutenant Talana. All three of which were in that first erotic short fiction. So there's other people that are going to be involved. In fact, some really cool characters that I think are going to be a ton of fun. So I'm really excited about this. This probably isn't going to be, I don't even like to give timelines anymore because, just shit happens. And I'm a one person. Here's the thing. So let me explain a little bit about this. Okay. With production, as much as you can. Okay, I know I have a lot of people that listen to my show and that are patrons that are content creators themselves, and you ask me a ton of questions about content creation, and I think I get copied quite a bit, not saying by the patrons necessarily, but just by a lot of people, especially out there in the Liberty movement, and I don't care. It's fine. Like I'm not. I'm flattered. Okay, but regardless. So let me tell you, if you can help it, do as much as you can on your own. You got to be a pretty impressive creative force, which allow me a moment of arrogance. Okay. But I'm a pretty fucking impressive creative force. All right. And I'm quoting people when I say that. All right. I don't have to say that about myself. I have other people whose opinions everyone respects that tell me that on a regular basis. And it's one of the things they love about me. So, anyway, as much as you can, you want to do your own, you want to be in charge of production, and you want to be the guy producing the content and making the content, doing a lot of the voice work, whatever else, because the more human pieces you bring into the production, honestly, the more troubles you run into. Okay. Now, Ellen and Stephanie are awesome. I generally do, there's no issue there. Okay. But when you start to get into other pieces, you end up waiting on other people. And and even if, if you're doing everything, you can be the cause of delays yourself, but at least then it's your own hide, that's kind of on the line, and it's your own damn fault, and there's no one else to blame, which is a good way to go through life. But because you don't want to be blaming everybody else for things. But anyway, yeah, as much as you can, do things on your own. So I like to keep my productions fairly small. And the few times that I've experimented with larger, and this is no offense to anybody that's worked with me, because it's all volunteer work. They're just doing it because they think it's cool, and hey, or maybe they love it, or whatever the reason that they're doing it. I think bravo. Okay. This is no complaint from me. I'm just saying, for your own work and sanity, for those that are content creators, just the more pieces you have, the more human pieces, more autonomous pieces you have involved, the harder it gets, and it really becomes a challenge. If it's just me doing it, I can produce content, bam, 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 bam. But when, there's a lot of other people involved, sometimes that causes delays and things take time. And it's a lesson I've learned. So I like to keep the amount of people that I work with really, really tiny, because then I can have, far better control over what's going on. Not that I'm like a tyrant or something, as far as, the creative control goes. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I give, the people that work with me, the women that work with me, and generally I work with all women, they have complete control over what's going to, hit the microphone and what's not. Okay. But regardless, that's just a tip to go forward. So anyway, those are the main three people that I'm working with. There's other people I'm really excited to work with. Honestly, some people across the pond that I'm really excited to work with. This is really, really cool. Script looks great. Everything is just, and the short story got great response. And I'm really, really, really happy for that. But again, I don't want to put a timeline on it, but it looks like it's probably going to be this summer. And then maybe for you'll get the holiday special for this year, or that was supposed to be for last year. We'll make that happen. A lot of that's already, recorded and largely done, but I want the Star Trek thing to happen. I want it to happen while Star Trek is really smoking hot, and it's smoking hot right now. And I want to make sure that that can get out there. Again, I've said before, because I think that it could bring in a lot of new people to Sovryn Tech, quite frankly. And also it's a lot of fun, and it could get a lot of attention in other ways. If not bringing new people, it might, who knows what could happen out of this. Of course, maybe nothing will happen out of it. I'm totally open to that too. But regardless, I'm loving it. It's doing very well. Everybody's really excited about it and having a good time with what's come out so far. The short story that I wrote, I think I was going to get to this. The short story that I wrote, I'll tell you, I wanted to do so much more, especially at the end with more of the erotic, more of the sex scene. But it gets to the point where oh, fuck, this is turning into a short story. This is turning into a novella, I should say. It's not a short story anymore. But it's amazing. I'm just writing and the shit just keeps spewing out, and then I have to tie it up quickly and shit, and that's the hard part when you're doing kind of like an origin story, not that it was an origin story, but it was an introduction story. And that was tough. You had to explain a few different things, and anyway, I'm glad that people enjoyed the story. There will be more Forbidden Frontiers fiction to come out, and then things will pick right back up with the Sovryn universe. As soon as that's out and done, because I love the Sovryn universe. I love working on it. Everybody loves being a part of it. Everybody that is a part of it thinks it's so cool. And so, why would I stop doing that? I like making my own shit, as much as I love working with other franchises. I really do. I'll always love making my own shit. But anyway, so that's what's going on with that. If you wanted a little update, here's another little tidbit of news. So Hyperchronius 2, if you're wondering about that, don't worry. That's still well in production. There's just things. 2017 was a very weird year, and 2018 is in many ways, not that it was bad, not that 2017 was bad necessarily, but 2018 is a lot of taking care of the loose ends from 2017. So anyway, that's it for your Star Trek update for April 2018. Again, for the Star Trek update for May 2018, we should have the ladies back on. And you know how good a time that's going to be, because, they bring all the fun. They are far better than I. So anyway, more content to come out this week, including yeah, it's cool, including some things you probably won't expect. So anyway, I will see you on the other side.